I never thought an airport could steal the breath from my lungs. Most people go there for reunions to welcome loved ones home with flowers and tears of joy. But me? That day, the airport gave me something else entirely. It gave me back the dead. My ticket shook in my hand as I stood by the arrivals gate, eyes scanning the crowd. And then I saw him. My husband. His familiar stride, the same tired suit he always wore on business trips. For a second, my chest eased, until I noticed the hand he was holding. At first, I thought it couldn't be real. My vision blurred, my knees nearly buckled, but my eyes refused to close. That hand, those delicate fingers, they belonged to her. The woman I had buried years ago. The woman whose coffin I had watched sink into the earth while mourners sobbed all around me. Her hair was just as dark, her walk just as steady, her laugh slicing through the noise of the airport like a knife tearing silk. She tilted her head toward him, and I swear to you, in that moment, the world around me vanished. Was she a ghost? A cruel trick of my exhausted mind? Or had I been living inside a lie bigger than my marriage itself? My heart pounded as they stopped just a few feet from me, unaware of my presence. I watched my husband lean close to her, whispering into her ear, his lips brushing so near her skin it made bile rise in my throat. She turned suddenly, her eyes sweeping across the crowd, as though she knew someone was watching. My whole body seized with terror and fury. If her gaze met mine, what then? I pressed myself back against a cold metal column, hiding in plain sight, and every nerve in me screamed to run. But I couldn't. I was trapped between disbelief and rage, torn apart by the impossible sight of a woman I had grieved, now smiling at my husband like she had stolen him from me all over again. My fingers trembled as I clutched my purse, my breath shallow and ragged, my mind a whirlwind of questions I wasn't ready to face. Part of me wanted to scream. To rush across that terminal, grab my husband by the collar, and demand answers in front of every stranger in that airport. But another part of me, colder, sharper, knew that this wasn't the moment. If I confronted them too soon, I'd lose the only chance I had to understand the truth. So instead, I did the unthinkable. I followed them. Step by step, weaving through the noise of rolling suitcases and boarding calls, I trailed the two people who had shattered my world, careful to stay hidden behind the shifting crowd. And that was when my chest tightened so hard I thought I'd collapse right there. Because as I closed the distance, I caught sight of something in her hand. Something small, familiar, something that once belonged to me. My stomach dropped, my head spun, and I realized this wasn't just a reunion. It was the beginning of the darkest secret I had ever uncovered. And when I tried to follow them through that crowded airport, what I discovered nearly stopped my heart for good. I buried her with my own hands. That thought haunted me as I sat alone that night, staring at nothing, unable to silence the echo of the airport scene. Years ago, I had watched the soil cover her coffin. I had pressed trembling fingers against the polished wood before it sank into the ground. I had laid flowers at her grave until the petals withered in the rain. That woman had been my best friend once, before she became my rival, before she took everything soft inside me and turned it into scars. And now she was walking, breathing, laughing, with my husband. The grief I thought I had buried with her clawed back to the surface. My chest felt tight, my throat raw from a scream I couldn't release. Memories of her flooded me, the late-night talks, the secrets shared, the way she always knew how to fill a room with her presence. And then the betrayal. How she looked at my husband too long. How he laughed at her jokes too easily. I told myself it was my imagination back then, that I was paranoid, insecure, but now I wondered if I had been right all along. For years, I had sacrificed everything to hold my family together. While my husband's business crumbled, it was me who worked extra shifts, me who paid the bills, me who held the house upright like a pillar made of flesh and bone. I cooked meals I could barely afford. I stretched every penny to keep our children clothed and educated. When his mother fell ill, it was my hands that bathed her, my back that bent over her bed, my heart that absorbed her final sobs. I gave so much of myself that sometimes I wondered if there was anything left of me at all. And yet my rewards were silence and distance. My son, once a boy who clung to me, grew colder, sharper, as if he resented the very sacrifices I had made for him. He locked himself in his room, spoke to me only in clipped sentences, and when I reached out, he pulled away. My husband, too, began moving in shadows, phone calls made in other rooms, trips with vague explanations, a smile that no longer belonged to me. The house that was once filled with laughter and arguments became a theater, where every face wore a mask and every word was a line from a script written to deceive me. I tried to convince myself that grief was playing tricks on me, that losing my best friend had twisted my perception of love and loyalty. But the cracks in the facade widened with every passing day. I noticed the way his clothes smelled faintly of perfume, not mine. I caught glimpses of receipts tucked quickly into pockets. I heard him humming to himself, a tune I hadn't heard in years, the same tune she used to hum when she was alive. Each detail stabbed me with a truth I wasn't ready to admit. Maybe she had never been gone, or maybe she had never left him. Then came the night I found it. His wallet carelessly left on the dresser while he showered. I wasn't the type to pry, but my hands moved before my conscience could stop them. Inside, among the crumpled bills and business cards, was a folded slip of paper. A receipt. My stomach tightened as I unfolded it. It wasn't for groceries. It wasn't for anything ordinary. It was for a hotel booking in another city. And the names, 2 names, were printed there in black ink. His name and hers. My vision swam as if the ground beneath me tilted. I read the words again and again, each time hoping they would change. But they didn't. My husband had checked into a hotel with the woman I had mourned. The woman I had cried over. The woman I had buried. My hands shook so violently that the paper nearly slipped from my grip. A cold sweat drenched me as though I'd been standing in a storm. I pressed the receipt to my chest, as if by holding it tighter I could stop my world from unraveling. I whispered to myself, no, this isn't real. But deep down I knew it was. All the subtle signs, all the whispered doubts I had silenced, came roaring back like a chorus of ghosts. The house, the silence, the shadows, none of it had been my imagination. It had been the truth, hiding in plain sight, waiting for me to be brave enough to see it. But what broke me wasn't the receipt itself. It was what I found tucked inside. A small note, folded carefully, almost lovingly, like something meant to be cherished. I unfolded it with trembling fingers, and the moment my eyes landed on the handwriting, my breath caught in my throat. I recognized it instantly, and tucked inside that receipt was a note. With handwriting I recognized instantly. The note slipped from my trembling fingers and fluttered onto the floor like a dead leaf. It wasn't just the words written on the paper. It was the handwriting. I knew those loops, those sharp strokes, the way her letters leaned slightly to the right as though they were always running ahead of her. It was hers, the woman I had buried, the woman whose coffin I had touched, whose absence had carved a canyon in my life. Every fiber of my body screamed that it was impossible. And yet, the evidence stared back at me. I picked it up again, forcing myself to read the words despite the nausea rising in my throat. Meet me where we always said we would. Don't let her find out. That was all. Short, cruel, intimate, words that sliced deeper than any knife. My husband had hidden this note inside a hotel receipt, as though it were a secret too precious to destroy. And suddenly the whispers in my head grew into screams. Had her death been faked? Was the woman in that coffin someone else? Or had I been tricked, grieving over a stranger while the real betrayer lived in the shadows? I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in bed next to him, his breathing steady, his body warm, while mine trembled with cold terror. Every exhale he made felt like a lie whispered into my ear. My eyes darted across the room, mapping every drawer, every box, every space where secrets could hide. And by morning, I had decided I would search. Even if it destroyed me, I would know the truth. The first drawer was easy, his desk. At first it looked innocent, stacks of bills, scattered pens, an old calculator. But hidden between the folders was something I almost missed. A thin envelope marked only with initials I didn't recognize. Inside were bank statements, account numbers, deposits in large amounts that had no explanation. Where had this money come from? And why was it hidden from me? My hands trembled as I flipped through page after page. Each deposit was followed by a withdrawal days later. A cycle, a pattern. A secret life bleeding our family dry. I told myself to stop, to put everything back and pretend I hadn't seen it. But once you open the door to suspicion, it never closes again. I moved to the wardrobe next. Buried beneath stacks of folded shirts was a small leather pouch. Inside were photographs. My heart nearly stopped when I saw them. They weren't old. They weren't memories. They were recent. Pictures of my husband standing beside her. The woman who wasn't supposed to exist anymore. Her face tilted toward him, smiling. His hand brushing her shoulder. Both of them alive, both of them betraying me with every pixel captured. But what broke me most wasn't their closeness. It was the places. Landmarks from cities he claimed to have visited for business trips. A cafe in Paris, a street in Rome, a hotel lobby in New York. All the times he told me he was working late, he was traveling with her. While I carried our home on my back, he carried her on his arm. I dropped the photographs, unable to breathe, unable to comprehend the scope of the deception. I stumbled back, clutching the desk for balance. Had my entire marriage been a performance? Had I been nothing but a placeholder while he lived another life? That night I heard it. A hushed phone call from the study. I pressed my ear against the door, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure it would give me away. His voice was low, shaky, a tone I hadn't heard in years. He said, "She can never know. Do you understand me? If she finds out, it's over." My knees buckled. He was talking about me. He was protecting their secret, not our family. I covered my mouth to silence the sob that clawed its way up my throat. I should have stormed in. I should have demanded answers. But instead, I froze, paralyzed by the weight of betrayal. I let him finish the call, and when he emerged minutes later, he smiled at me as if nothing had happened. That smile, casual, empty, was the cruelest mask of all. But what happened next left me speechless. Days later, while tidying the living room, I found a travel bag pushed beneath the sofa. Inside were tickets, flights to places we had never visited together, booked under his name and hers. My hands shook as I pulled out one boarding pass after another, proof of journeys I had never been invited to. And tucked in one of the pockets was something worse, a hotel keycard with a date scribbled on the back. The date matched the day he told me he was visiting his sick cousin. The walls of my house felt like they were closing in, suffocating me with every secret that oozed from their cracks. I started noticing things I had overlooked before. The way he guarded his phone like a weapon. The way my son flinched whenever I mentioned her name, as if he knew something I didn't. And the silence. Oh, the silence. It wasn't the peaceful kind. It was the heavy, suffocating quiet of lies stretching thin, ready to snap. One evening, while cleaning the study, I noticed a drawer that wouldn't open. It had a lock I'd never seen before. My pulse raced as I searched for a key, and when I finally found it, hidden in a cufflink box, I knew my life would never be the same again. Inside the drawer were files stacked neatly, as if he had prepared them for someone else to find one day. Insurance papers, contracts, letters, and at the very bottom, folded carefully, was a death certificate. My breath hitched. I pulled it out, expecting it to be hers, the woman I had buried. Expecting it to be the proof I needed to confirm the impossible. But when my eyes landed on the name, the room spun around me. My body went cold, my fingers numb, the paper trembling between them. Because it wasn't her name, it was someone else. Someone I loved even more. And when I looked closer at the name on that certificate, the room spun around me. Because it wasn't her. It was someone I loved even more. I slammed the certificate down on the table so hard the glass rattled in its frame. My hands were shaking, my throat burned, and when the words finally tore from my mouth, they were louder than I intended. "Who is she?" The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. My husband froze, his face draining of color. His eyes darted from the paper to my face, then back again, like a man caught in the glare of headlights. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. That silence, that suffocating silence was his confession. "Don't you dare stand there and pretend you don't know." I screamed, my voice breaking. I buried her. I grieved her. And you? I could barely breathe, the words catching like fire in my chest. "You've been with her this whole time." It was then that I heard the footsteps. My son stood in the doorway, his face pale, his eyes wide. "Mom, what are you talking about?" His voice trembled, but it carried the sharp edge of fear. He turned to his father, demanding, "What's going on? Who is she talking about?" My husband's lips finally moved. But what came out was not the truth, it was poison. "She's imagining things. She's always been dramatic, always twisting stories." His tone was calm, rehearsed, almost gentle. It was the same voice he used to soothe a child after a nightmare. Only this time, I was the child he was trying to silence. I looked at my son, desperate for him to see the truth in my eyes. "Don't listen to him. He's been lying to us both for years. Look." I shoved the photographs and receipts across the table, paper scattering like broken glass. But instead of understanding, my son recoiled. He looked at me as though I were the one betraying him, and then he shouted words I will never forget. "Stop trying to destroy this family." It felt like the floor split open beneath me. My own son, my blood, had chosen him, chosen the lies over me. My heart cracked in ways I didn't think were possible. What would you do if your own child stood on the side of your betrayer? Would you fight harder or would you break? That night, the house became a battlefield. Shouts ricocheted off the walls, tears burned like acid, and doors slammed with the force of war drums. I demanded the truth. He dodged, deflected, denied. He paced the floor, his voice rising until he finally cracked. And when he did, the truth spilled out like a flood too long dammed. "Yes," he roared, his face twisted with rage. "Yes, I lied. For decades, I lied. I did what I had to do. Do you think you were enough? Do you think this house, this life, was all I wanted? You gave me duty, not passion. Obligation, not freedom." His words cut deeper than knives. I staggered back, but he didn't stop. "She gave me what you couldn't, and I'll never apologize for it." For a moment, silence choked the air. My son's eyes darted between us, his hands clenched, his breathing ragged. I wanted him to see his father's cruelty, to understand, but betrayal runs deep, and sometimes the wounds blind more than they reveal. I knew then that if I fought with rage alone, I would lose everything. I needed to be smarter, colder, sharper. That night, when the shouting finally subsided and the house sank into a fragile, broken silence, I made a choice. I would gather proof. Every lie, every crime, every forged signature. I would build a case so strong even his honeyed words couldn't shatter it. The next morning, I sat in a lawyer's office, my hands still trembling as I slid the photographs, bank statements, and receipts across her desk. She adjusted her glasses, her face tightening with every page. Finally, she looked up, her eyes steady on mine. "This isn't just betrayal," she said. "This is fraud. Financial manipulation. Identity documents. If you want to fight, you have more than enough to bury him." Her words steadied me. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of control. I began recording his late-night calls, storing copies of every file I found, hiding them in places he'd never look. Every whispered denial, every slip of the tongue, I captured it all. He thought he was untouchable, that decades of lies made him invincible. But little by little, I was tightening the noose around his neck. But then, the betrayal deepened. One afternoon, I walked into the courthouse for an early hearing. My heart was pounding, my evidence folder clutched to my chest. And as I stepped into the hallway, I heard it, my son's voice, raised, angry. "She's the one who destroyed us." He wasn't talking to me. He was talking about me, in front of strangers. In front of the law, my knees nearly buckled as I realized just how poisoned he had become. I wanted to run to him, to hold him, to shake him and say, "No, son, it's him. He's the one tearing us apart." But the words caught in my throat. The betrayal of a spouse wounds you. The betrayal of a child? It guts you. When the bailiff called us inside, my legs felt like stone. My husband walked ahead of me, confident, smug, with my son trailing behind him like a shadow. I entered that courtroom alone, but with fire in my chest. Because this wasn't just about a marriage anymore. It was about justice. It was about truth. It was about reclaiming every sacrifice I had ever made. And then, the moment came. The judge looked up, his gavel tapping lightly against the desk, and called my name. The world froze in silence. Every sound, every breath, every heartbeat stopped. My life, the life I thought I knew, hung in the balance of that single word. And when the judge called my name, the world froze in silence. The gavel struck once, echoing through the courtroom, and the air thickened with tension. My husband sat across from me, his jaw clenched, his hands twitching on the table as though even his body could no longer contain the lies he had built. I rose slowly, my legs weak but my voice steady, and laid the first sheet of evidence before the judge. "This," I said, holding up the page, "is not my signature." "It is a forgery," whispers rippled through the gallery. The judge leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as I pointed to the bank account number scrawled beneath the forged name. "This account exists under both my husband's and her identity. Money that should have gone to our family, to our son's education, to my sacrifices, it was funneled here." My voice wavered, but I pressed on. Everything we built together was being drained right under my nose. I heard gasps, felt the heat of strangers' eyes burning into my back, but I didn't stop. Page after page, I revealed the truth. The fake receipts. The secret hotel bookings. The policies signed without my knowledge. Whispers rippled through the gallery. The judge leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as I pointed to the bank account number scrawled beneath the forged name. This account exists under both my husband's and her identity. Money that should have gone to our family, to our son's education, to my sacrifices, it was funneled here. My voice wavered, but I pressed on. Everything we built together was being drained right under my nose. I heard gasps, felt the heat of strangers' eyes burning into my back, but I didn't stop. Page after page, I revealed the truth. The fake receipts, the secret hotel bookings, the policies signed without my knowledge. Each document was a dagger, and with every revelation, I watched my husband shrink further into his chair. But what happened next left me speechless. Each document was a dagger, and with every revelation, I watched my husband shrink further into his chair. But what happened next left me speechless. When the final envelope was opened, silence swept the courtroom. Inside was the death certificate, the one I had found hidden beneath insurance papers. "Your Honor," I whispered, my throat tightening. "This certificate does not belong to the woman I buried. It belongs to someone else." My hand shook as I turned the page so the court could see. Her death was staged. The crowd erupted. Gasps turned into shocked cries. Reporters scribbled furiously. My husband's face turned crimson as he lunged toward me, only to be restrained by guards. "You don't understand," he bellowed. "You don't know what you're saying." But the judge slammed his gavel again, his voice thunderous. "Order in this court!" I turned to face my husband, my voice trembling but loud enough for everyone to hear. Tell them how you helped her fake her death. Tell them how you stood beside me at her funeral, held my hand as I wept, while you knew she was alive. Tell them how you planned to vanish with her, using every dime of what I bled for. And then he broke. His head fell into his hands, shoulders shaking. At first, I thought it was another performance, another act to earn pity. But then the words spilled out, ragged and raw. "Yes," he cried. "Yes, it's true. We planned it all. She wanted freedom. I wanted her. And together we built a new life in the shadows while you carried the weight of it all." The courtroom gasped again, a sound like a single creature inhaling at once. Reporters nearly fell out of their chairs. My heart pounded so violently I thought it might burst. And then the unthinkable happened. My son stood, his face pale, his voice shaking with rage. He turned to me, not to his father, but to me, and shouted, "You're not even my real mother!" The words struck like bullets. The room spun, my knees buckled. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Had my husband poisoned him so deeply that he would deny my very blood? Or had there been another secret buried beneath all the others, one even I hadn't known? The gallery erupted in chaos. Some gasped, others muttered, and the bailiff shouted for silence. But all I heard was my son's voice echoing in my skull. Not my real mother. I wanted to scream, to beg him to look at me and remember the nights I held him through fevers, the mornings I packed his lunches, the years I poured every ounce of myself into raising him. How could he erase me with one sentence? The judge struck his gavel again, harder this time. "Enough!" he roared. The room fell silent, except for the sound of my husband sobbing into his hands. He looked at my son, his eyes bloodshot, and whispered, "She was never meant to know." None of this was supposed to come out. That was when I understood the depth of the manipulation. It wasn't just lies. It was layers of deceit, tangled so tightly around us that even my own child couldn't see the truth anymore. My son's rage wasn't his. It was inherited, fed to him by a father who had been crafting illusions his whole life. I stood straighter, wiped my tears, and faced the judge. "Your Honor, I have nothing more to say. The documents speak louder than I ever could." My voice cracked, but I refused to let it shatter. "I only ask for justice, for the years stolen from me, for the family torn apart by lies, and for the truth that deserves to be heard." The judge's eyes softened for the briefest moment before he turned to the clerk. The gavel struck again. "This court finds..." The room held its breath. My hands clenched the edge of the table so hard my knuckles turned white. "The defendant guilty of fraud, conspiracy, and falsification of documents." The sound of that verdict was both salvation and devastation. My husband collapsed into his chair, his face a mask of defeat. Reporters rushed from the room to break the news. Strangers stared at me with a mix of pity and awe. My son turned away, refusing to meet my eyes. The judge's gavel came down one final time, sealing the end of the trial. And in that silence, with everyone's eyes on me, I realized I was finally free. Free from his lies, free from the weight of secrets I never asked to carry. But freedom came at a cost I could never repair, because justice had been served. But my family was gone, and in that silence I realized I was finally free, but at a cost I could never repair. The courtroom doors closed behind me, and for the first time in months, there was silence. No whispers, no gasps, no gavel-striking judgment. Just me, standing in the hallway, clutching papers that no longer had the power to break me. The trial was over. The lies were out in the open. But the pain lingered like smoke after a fire. I had lost my husband to betrayal, my son to poisoned loyalties, and a friend I once trusted to her own greed. It would have been so easy to collapse under the weight of it all. But something inside me refused. At night, the house felt like a graveyard. Every corner held memories, his laughter echoing in the kitchen, my son's footsteps racing down the hallway. And yet all of it was gone. Some nights I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering, was I the fool for believing? Or was I the survivor for still standing? But as the days passed, I realized something that shook me more than the betrayal itself. I was free. Free from manipulation. Free from lies. Free to build something that was mine alone. I started small. I joined a women's group at the community center, where strangers looked into my eyes and said, I know exactly what you feel. Their stories mirrored my own. Husbands who betrayed, children who turned cold, friends who twisted truth into daggers. And in their voices, I didn't hear weakness. I heard strength. For the first time, I felt less like a victim and more like a fighter who had survived a battlefield most people never even saw. But healing wasn't neat. There were moments I wanted to scream, moments I wanted to throw plates against the wall, moments when shame crept in and whispered, you weren't enough. Have you ever heard that voice inside your head? The one that tries to convince you that you failed. Even when you gave everything? That voice nearly broke me. But then, I looked in the mirror one morning, eyes swollen, hair undone, face pale, and I whispered back, I am enough. I always was. That was the moment the healing truly began. The world outside still judged me. Neighbors whispered. Some avoided me, afraid betrayal was contagious. But others, women especially, came quietly, one by one, knocking on my door, saying, how did you do it? How did you survive? And so I began to speak. Not with bitterness, but with truth. I told them, your worth is not in a husband's loyalty. It is not in a child's approval. It is in the way you stand when the world tries to bury you alive. Slowly, my home began to change. The walls that once echoed with shouting now carried the sound of my own laughter, soft at first, then stronger. I filled the silence with music, with the smell of fresh bread baking, with plants I grew in the windowsill, living proof that life could grow again, even in ruins. And in that simple act of reclaiming space, I found something more precious than wealth or inheritance. I found myself, do you know the strangest part? Even though I had lost so much, I didn't feel empty anymore. Because loss had stripped away everything false and left me with the only thing that mattered, the truth of who I was. And the truth was this: I had survived betrayal, shame, and heartbreak, and I was still here. That made me powerful in a way no money or marriage ever could. One evening, as the sun dipped low, I sat on the porch, watching the sky burn with orange and gold. For a fleeting moment, I thought of him, my husband. I thought of the lies, the forged papers, the stolen years. And instead of anger, I felt something I never expected: pity. Because he had chained himself to lies while I had finally broken free, and my son. The wound there was the deepest. His words still echoed, "You're not even my real mother." Those words cut into me like nothing else. But time has a way of softening even the sharpest edges. I hold on to hope that one day he will see the truth. That one day he will understand that betrayal was never love, and lies were never protection. Until then, I carry on, because in the end, what I discovered was simple yet life-changing. The greatest inheritance is not land, not houses, not bank accounts filled with stolen wealth. The greatest inheritance is freedom. The freedom to live without chains. The freedom to rebuild without permission. The freedom to breathe without lies suffocating every breath. And so, when people ask me now, how did you survive? How did you rise again? I tell them the same thing I whisper to myself every night before sleep. The truth may break your heart, but it will also set you free. And that's when I learned the truth. Freedom is the greatest inheritance.